Today I am going to show you how to make a ruffled shabby chic doll apron. It's going to be a step-by-step tutorial. If you want to grab the pattern, it's on my Etsy shop, Wee Whistle Pig. So you're going to need 1/4 inch elastic, 1/4 yard of fabric total. You should probably have a variety of different colors, at least 2. I typically do 3. Each seam allowance is 1/4 inch or smaller, depending on how small you want to go. So print out the pattern sheets on 5 and 6 of your PDF. Then you cut the pattern pieces out of the paper and you tape the dotted lines together. To make sure the fit is correct, measure that 1 inch square that is on one of the pattern pieces. You just make sure it equals the actual 1 inch. If it's not, check your scaling and make sure you're printing at 100%. So now with your pattern pieces all cut out of the paper, now you decide what colors you want for each part of your apron. Then you cut those out, make sure you are following the grain lines, but otherwise it's pretty simple. Don't forget to cut out your elastic pieces. There should be elastic guides, but also in the pattern instructions, I also measured out just how long each piece should be. That about finishes up step 1. So now we are on to step 2. So make sure you heat up your iron. Usually I just do it to cotton because I'm using cotton, but make sure you do whatever is appropriate for your fabric. What we're gonna do is we're gonna press up 1/4 inch on all sides of the neck and tie straps. So the long, short, all 4 sides. We're going to then fold the long sides together. So we're making this long strap. We're gonna press all that together. And then we are going to go on to the bottom ruffles and the top ruffles. So that one you're going to press up the 1/4 inch on just 3 sides. Then you're going to press up those 3 sides again. What we're doing here is we're just making sure that all the raw edges are encased so they don't come all frayed and unravel while your child is playing with her apron. So now we're on to step 3. So keeping close to the edge, sew long side of neck and tie straps. Basically what we're doing is we're trying to keep the casing still large enough to make sure that 1/4 inch elastic can go through. Keeping as close to the edges as possible is pretty important for this part. And then once that is done, you thread the neck and tie elastic through the appropriate straps. I usually grab a safety pin. I stick it to the end of the elastic and then I'll work it through the strap. So I'll be very careful with this part. So I'll just move it just until it is flush with the edge of the fabric. And then I will zigzag it closed so the elastic can't get into the case. So once that one edge is sewn to the fabric, then I will continue to push the safety pin through and out the other side. And then I'll repeat that. I'll zigzag on the short ends again, just making sure that the elastic won't just zip inside as soon as I let go. So I'll do that on the neck and the tie straps, and then I'll set them aside. All right, now we're on to step 4. So we're gonna be working with the top and bottom ruffles for this step. So those edges you pressed, now we're going to hem. So basically we're hemming them. So once you've hemmed both ruffle pieces, now we are going to sew the basting stitch onto the one side we did not hem. That's going to be the top of the ruffle. So we're going to baste both top and bottom ruffles on the top. You're going to use a long basting stitch. You're going to keep as close to the edge as possible without going off it. Now we're going to divide the top and bottom ruffles into equal sections, matching middles, edges, and quarters together. So basically I just divide it in half, pin it, I divide the 2 sections into half again, and I pin it. And however many times more seems reasonable to you. And then once I've done it on both of the pieces, then I will match up the different halves, quarters, whatever sections. I will pin right and the wrong sides together. Make sure the fabric faces the same direction with the shorter ruffle on top.
All right, so now we are on to step 5. So on the apron piece itself, measure about 1 inch down from the sides to pin the ruffle on. I did mark it on the pattern piece itself, so if you want a guide. Otherwise, yeah, just measure that 1 inch down from the side. Divide the apron into sections just like the ruffles. Make sure that your dividing points are within those pins. So don't measure all the way up to the top anymore, just measure from the pins to the pins. If that makes sense.
Once you've divided the apron itself into sections, now you are going to take the ruffle. And usually I start by pinning the edges of the apron ruffle onto the pins I put in at first. So then it's easier just to pin the half point, the quarter point, whatever other points you put in. And you're going to want to put right sides together for this. So once you've pinned the ruffle on, then you pull the basting threads to gather the ruffle and spread the ruffles out. So there's kind of a trick to this. Typically, when I sew the gathering stitch, I have the right side facing me. So then when I gather the ruffles, I typically go for the thread that comes from the front of the item. In other words, it's the right facing fabric. Basically, you just want to make sure that you're not pulling both threads from each seam, each basting gathering. You're going to have 2 threads to pull. Each one should be from each ruffle, if that makes sense. Then you're going to sew the ruffle onto the apron using a regular seam stitch length again. Alright, so now we are on to step 6. So just finished sewing the ruffle onto the apron. So now we are going to trim all the extra threads and zigzag around the entire apron.
And then once you've zigzagged around everything, then you will fold over about 1/4 inch on all remaining edges of the apron. It's not an exact science, so just whatever works best for you. And now, before we sew that, we're going to pin the neck strap onto the wrong side of apron neck. So typically I will put the edge that we sewed on the outside. I don't think there's any problem with putting it on either side, but for me, I just put it on the outside. And you pin it on just wherever looks right on the neck part. And then for the tie straps, you are going to pin it on similarly, except right above where the ruffle ends. So that's why we had to measure down from the top rather than put the ruffle all the way to the top, just because it's a little bit easier, not as many layers. You're going to put it so the seams are flush with each other. So it's going to be a funny loop, and it's going to be a little tricky to sew, but it's not too bad. So once you've pinned both straps on, then you're going to sew all around the edge, ruffle to ruffle. And if you want to, I typically go back and forth on this strap at least twice, just to make sure little hands can't pull it off. Step 7. On the right side of apron, top stitch around the neck portion of the apron. I also top stitch the straps on the sides, and then you trim threads and it's all ready to go. Just made a doll apron with ruffles.